Alright, in this video I'm going to take the rough sketch that I have right here I started on a train yard with kind of this, I don't know, train station, something like that in the background, just sketching it out roughly. In order to complete this image, to get it placed in accurate perspective, I just kind of hashed it out as I thought it might look. But obviously, since I'm not standing parallel to either side of these train cars, I'm standing at an angle with the corner of the thing that's closest to me, and so there's no straight lines. There's going to have to be a vanishing point off to the right side and a vanishing point off to the left side so that I can get what I need out of the image. Two-point perspective is the type of grid that we use in this situation, and more often than not, two-point perspective is probably what you'll use. One point is a little less common in nature. So for this purpose, I'm going to stick to 2-point. So I'm going to expand my canvas size so I have some space to work around it. When I set this to pixels, you can see right now I have a width of 3000 and a height of 2000, which is fine for drawing with, but I'm going to want to bring it up quite a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and make the width 10,000 and the height 8,000. Hit OK. And in this case, I think I'm going to mask out this area of my canvas, leave that as the primary point. So that everything around it is a different color. It's easier to work with the grid that way. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to build my grid around this. I don't really need this much space up top. That's excessive, so I'm going to use the marquee tool to trim this down. Image and crop. And then I'm going to build a grid that will roughly fit what I need here. One of the basic elements that you're always going to need is a horizon line, so just kind of determining where that horizon is. It's probably about right here, but again, I'm guessing. The sketch is going to be changed some, but rather than using a guide for that, just to keep this consistent, I'm going to use the line tool since we'll probably be using that throughout. And I'll pull a line through roughly where I think that horizon line would be, because I'm standing at about this height with these big train cars. One of the other things that we have to determine is the station point. And the station point is really sort of where you would be positioned down at the bottom. And with that comes the center vision. You know, where is my center vision in this image? I'm going to pretend we're going to put it, in fact, I'll use a blank layer for this. We're going to put that center vision right there. I'm going to make it red just so it matches everything else. So, center of vision right there. And from that down to the bottom we'll get a station point. The station point is where the camera is theoretically positioned away from this. I want to put it far enough away that when I create my vanishing point lines, this thing is not behaving. When I create my vanishing point lines, there's going to be enough space that they can go around the edges, because I want everything to fit within the V. So there's going to be lines, you know, that come up like this from either direction. I want to make sure that they fit neatly in there. The canvas does anyway. That'll keep any distortion from getting into the image. What I'm going to create for this is, I should really be labeling these two. See, there's my sketch. There's my horizon. Center of vision. Just trying to make sure. Station point line. That one's blank because I just started creating layers. It's a really good idea, especially when you're building grids, to keep this sort of thing organized. What I'm going to do is I'm going to build basically an L. I'm going to build two lines like this. And they don't have to be exactly the same length, I just need them to be long enough. And right now they're separate. I'm going to take those and I'm going to merge the shapes so that they're just one. This is going to be my vanishing measure. I'm going to use that to measure out where my vanishing points lie. Now when I click the Show Transform controls up at the top, that allows me to move it around. And what I'm wanting to do is take this corner down here, which I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Take this corner down at the very bottom, and I want it to be placed right here on the station point and be to rotate based on that. Because unlike with 1-point perspective, where we'll typically just use 45-degree lines coming from the station point to determine the grid, in this case we can actually have some flexibility. We can rotate it certain ways. There just has to be a 90-degree angle between those two lines. So the corner I'm going to put on the station point down here. And then I'm going to take the anchor point, which is this little target that floats in the middle after you show transform controls. This determines from which point the object rotates, or in this case, these two lines. I'm going to move this down to the corner, and then when I rotate these lines, you'll see that it hinges on the area by the station point. It looks like I'm going to have to make this a little bit bigger, because I didn't make the lines quite long enough to make sure that they go past the horizon line. I want to make sure that they go past the horizon line so I can use that to determine my vanishing points. But now if I rotate, you see I've got a little bit of space as far as determining where these vanishing points would be. And I'm just kind of guessing when I look at these to determine if, where would this line strike? See, I think it would be further that direction. And that means that this line would strike about right there. That seems about right. So I'll just hit OK and leave those there. Now I'm going to create my actual vanishing points. These are enormously important, and these are kept throughout the process. So I'm going to use a different color for them to make sure I can identify them. And there's one here, and there's one over here. And so using my rough sketch to determine how to position those, I'm not going to get something that's perfectly even, perfectly symmetrical. The 2-point perspective grid does not have to be. It should be based on the sketch. It should be based on the idea of the sketch, trying to figure out what rotation of these vanishing point measuring lines best fits the sketch that you've built. If it was completely symmetrical, it would mean that I'm looking dead on right down the middle of an object, like the edge of it right here, and that it recedes at exactly the same level on either side. It's not always what you're going to see, so using a rough sketch in the beginning is really helpful to get a better result. Now what I'm going to do is I have to create some measuring points to help me build out a grid. So I'm going to begin with creating some new lines. This is one of the points where people tend to get a little lost. I'm going to create a line that is the exact same length as this from the station point up to this vanishing point. I'll go back to my move tool, and then I'm going to move the anchor point down here, up here to the vanishing point, so that I can rotate it perfectly horizontal to where the horizon is. What I'm using that for, I'll move it a little bit above so you can see, is when I take the length from station point to vanishing point and I move it horizontally, where that line ends becomes a vanishing point, a measuring point on this side. Sorry, I get my terminology bouncing around all over the place. I'm going to do measuring points in green because they're temporary. They're just going to be here to help me. Vanishing points over here on the side are permanent. These measuring points are temporary. So I need one for that side. Once I've done it, I can delete that line. I don't need it anymore. But I have to do the other side. Let's see, this one is measuring point right. Now to do the other side, create a line from station point to vanishing point. Show transform controls, move the anchor point up here and then rotate until it's completely horizontal. And then I can move it up just a little bit so I can see. That's purely to help me see things. Then I'll zoom in here and I'll look for that place where it ends. Create myself a new layer. I'm going to name it measuring point left. And I'll create a dot right there. Then I can get rid of that line that I was using. My canvas is jumping around a little more than I had anticipated. There we go. So now I have measuring points on either side. I'll make this one a little bigger. There we go. So it matches. And what these will do is help me create the tile floor grid that allows me to plot perfectly every item in the image, every element. So now what I'll do is I'll create some bricks down here at the bottom. I'm going to take my station point. I'm going to solidify it a little bit more. Give it kind of a solid core so I can see better. And then I'm going to take my rectangle tool and I'm going to create a series of bricks across the bottom. These are actually going to be pretty good size. I'm going to make them long. Give them a different color than that. And I'm going to butt these up right against the station point. One on this side, one on the other side. Duplicate those two with Command J. Duplicate them again. And then go to the other side. So I've got 6 of these. It's not a specific number that you need. You just need enough of them. And they're really large. It's important that I made them large because these are going to be the individual tiles that go up here. Just by the time we reach that point, they're going to be much smaller. So it's better to oversize them down here on the bottom. I'm going to take all these and put them in a folder. Into a bin, a group, and call them bricks. That just helped me remember it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create more lines. I'm going to use something I think in a bright yellow. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start over here with this measuring point, and I'm going to create a line over to this edge. I'll create a line over to this edge. And a line in between here. And then switching to the other side, doing the same thing. Line to right here. A line to right here. And a line to right here. This is very similar to what we do with one-point perspective. But it's a little different because this that I'm building out here is not actually my tile floor. This is helping me determine more points to measure with. The 2-point perspective grid is complicated. In order to get it right, you have to go through additional steps to make sure everything is measured out properly. So what these are just measuring lines. They're coming from my measuring points, which is what their purpose is, and what they're helping me determine is this. Right here, along this line where the intersection is, right here, right here. These are the points that I need. These are what these lines are helping me determine. We've measured out to get these points. Once I have those points laid down, I can make the bricks go away. I can make the measuring lines go away. And I should be able to make my measuring points go away unless I'm forgetting something. Because what we're doing at this point is building out the actual grid. These are going to be my actual, real deal vanishing lines. I'm going to choose blue to create them. And I'm going to go from vanishing point over here. It's so easy to get those mixed up. I need to come up with some good lingo. to represent them. And I'm going through these dots that I just created. And this is where I'm getting my actual grid from. It's probably not going to be perfect, but it's close enough. Now you see what has happened though. You can see my tile floor beginning to take shape and how this will begin to manifest here on this image. You'll be able to see this, crawling up that direction. In fact, I'm going to take this sketch and I'm going to drop its opacity so it's not in the way. I'm going to keep everything grouped together. Again, keeping your layers organized is so important for this process. Otherwise, it's just a mess. So here's what we're going to do. This stops now. How do I extend the grid further so that it goes all the way back to the horizon line? And the answer to that is, well, it's difficult. What you have to do is to create a 45-degree line. See, if we had created a grid that was perfectly dead center, this line from our center of vision to our vanishing point would be useful, because it would go straight through the corners of all of these square tiles going back, and I could use that to my advantage. But because, like most two-point perspective grids, it's a little off-center, it's a little more organic and asymmetric, then that doesn't work. The corners of my tiles are actually off quite a bit. So these lines then are no longer useful for me, this center of vision and the station point line. I don't need them anymore. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a line from down here at my station point, and I'm going to pass it through each of these corners until I reach the horizon line. Now that point is useful to me. What I can do is create a little dot up here. And this is going to help me determine how my grid would extend backwards, because if it's going through the corner of each of these tiles, then it would continue to do that all the way back. So if I start drawing lines then, from that point I've just created down to these dots I've already been using, make these a little brighter so they're easier to see. That one I don't need because I've already got a line there. But just to keep it the same color, I'll cover it. I can then continue building the grid by determining where each of these lines intersect. So say from this side, there's an intersection here. There's an intersection at this point above it. These are helping me create the tiles that go further and further back. So once I run out of lines like I did here, I have nowhere else to go. What I can do is switch sides and start going the other direction. And this grid will slowly build itself out by jumping from side to side and continuing the grid backwards. Point up there. I didn't take that quite far enough. There we go. See, it can be helpful then to zoom in as much as I can. And what I would do is just keep moving further backwards, jumping back and forth, side to side, until my grid was finished out all the way to the horizon. You can see how the reason why I made the bricks the size that they were is because by the time you get over here to where we're working, the tiles get very, very small. And that's the reason why we start so large, to ensure that they can be reduced. I'm not going to finish out this entire thing, but it becomes a little therapeutic after a while, just sitting here drawing these lines. And again, this is why I have kept them in a folder over there in the layers palette, because you can see they're growing substantially, the number is. And eventually it's going to get so dense back here that it's impossible to see. And also little imperfections in my grid, for example, just where the elements are positioned. I mean, you see these lines, they're not all dead center on the horizon, so they're not perfect. You can see them kind of coming out of here like threads. They're not perfect. The grid is not going to be perfect, and there shouldn't be a reason why it needs to be. But the question becomes, can I use this grid to complete the visual that I want? So, for example, if I'm drawing out these images up here, you know, if I take everything up to this point and I put it in a folder and I call it grid, so I've got folders within folders within folders, and I drop the opacity of that so that it's more subtle. Can I then use these vanishing point lines that I've built to create my train cars? Because it's based on my sketch, I'm not having to change an enormous amount. It's working very well. So here's a door maybe on the side of this. Maybe that door stands out some, maybe a little wider than that, kind of sticks off of the surface. I can build all these things out using the 2-point perspective grid that I've already made. This one's sitting back a little bit. There's a train car there. And then of course this one's going the other direction. So the answer is yes. This is a good grid. It gets the job done based primarily off these vanishing points. Because I built the tile floor beneath, I could even measure out and say, well, you know, this is how wide this train car is. How wide should this one back here be to be the same size? Helps keep it in proportion. So when we build the tile floor for the grid, we're doing a full comprehensive grid that will show us every piece of information you could possibly need to create elements that have the same size relationships. However, if it really came down to it, all you would need are the vanishing points on either side that are measured out properly, so that you're creating elements that are perfectly squared, that have perfect 90-degree angles, like a train car would, so that it doesn't collapse too soon or the angle's too obtuse or too acute. These are the kind of things you have to be aware of when you're creating something that's going to be a visual that people recognize, something that will be realistic, and linear perspective is perfect for that.